which is I'll start over again. Now we're recording. Gotta love technology. So welcome everybody. We see lots of people trickling through. We're so excited. Thank you very much for joining the Nüton team for this webinar that we have today called What is Body Neutrality and How Could It Be Helpful? We are very excited to be partnering with SERC, which is the Sexuality Education Resource Center of Manitoba. We're just going to do a few introductions and then we will get right into it. So before we start, we would like to acknowledge that we are tuning in from Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is located on the lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, and Anishinaabe, Cree, Dakota, Ayote, Dakota, Dene, Anishinaabe, Oji Cree, and the homeland of the Michif Red River Métis Nation. Friday is September 30th, which is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So please join us in acknowledging that we all have a role to play and a responsibility to truth and reconciliation. So just a few housekeeping things before we dive in. We have a handout that is available in the chat box. So please feel free to head over to our website to download that. Please ensure that your microphone is muted just to reduce background noise, but seems like we're all good there. If you have any questions throughout the presentation today, please feel free to pop that into the Q&A area of Zoom. So that's just right at the bottom of your screen. And we'll be answering as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. A recording will be available shortly, so if you have friends or family that missed this, we will be posting that on our website shortly, so stay tuned for an email about that. And you will also be getting a copy of the slides from today as well. And we do have a wonderful prize pack, so please stay tuned because we will be drawing for the winner after the webinar today. Pass it over to you, Tressa.
Great. Hello, everyone. Nice to see some familiar names popping into the participants and attendees here. So my name is Tressa Beaulieu. I am a registered dietitian and proud Métis woman with Oji Cree ancestral ties to Lac St. Anne area, now known as Lake Nipigon. I have pronouns that I go by she and her. I have many privileges, including having an able-bodied, relatively thin, and I am food secure as well. I work part-time as a nutrition educator with Nüton and absolutely love it, especially because we get to host amazing webinars and workshops like these. And I'm really hoping that you enjoy today's presentation. So I'll pass it back to Amanda to introduce herself.
Wonderful. So my name is Amanda Hamill. I'm also a dietitian here with Nüton as a nutrition educator. I identify as a white settler. I'm also able-bodied and I have thin privilege, and my pronouns are she and her. And we are just so excited to get started. So for those of you who are not familiar with Nüton, we are funded very generously by the Dairy Farmers of Canada in order to provide you with free resources and webinars like this. We believe in an all foods fit approach, and we provide training and nutrition programs to Manitoba educators, like probably some of you in the virtual room today, so that we can help kids feel comfortable around food and eating. And we also hope to inspire educators to have a positive impact on children and youth food stories using experience-based learning and exploring a variety of foods. So without further ado, we will pass the mic over to our friends at SERC.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining. So I think we'll start with quick intros too about ourselves. So my name is Chris. My pronouns are she, they. I work in the Brandon office. So for SERC, we have offices in Winnipeg and Brandon, and I'm in Brandon. I do lots of work with youth, so lots of stuff in schools and things like that as well. I've worked at SERC for almost 2 years now. I think my favorite thing to teach is puberty, especially for like grade 5, 6. It's super fun. I recently graduated with a degree in psychology, so I have some like extra knowledge around that kind of stuff. And I have 2 kids of my own who are 8 and 10. Lots of other stuff I could share, I'm sure, but I'll leave it at that and I'll pass it over to Jay.
Thanks, Chris. My name's Jay. I am a they, and I've been with SERC for 6 years. I immigrated to Canada. I'm not originally from here. I immigrated from the United States. I have a social work background, background in working with folks living with HIV and AIDS, working with folks of many different ages. But my role at SERC currently in the Winnipeg office is I do our service provider training, much of our service provider training. So if you're wearing a professional hat in this workshop, in a school, healthcare environment or whatnot, I would potentially be one of the people to come do training, like in a workplace with staff. So if that's something you're seeking, that's one of the many things we do. But I'm going to pass it back to Chris, and I believe she's going to tell you more about SERC.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen too, so give me 1 second here. Yes, so as we said, we're from the Sexuality Education Resource Center. We're here today to talk about body neutrality. Let me just line this up a little bit better. Okay. So yes, Jay does service provider training, and we do lots of work with youth. So if you go to our website, which is down here in the corner, you can go to what we offer, and we have service provider training here. So there's a training institute with lots of different workshops there. All really great. And then the Teen Talk website is right here as well. So that's a resource that you can provide to youth. And there's tons of information around like sexual health and bodies and relationships and lots of good stuff. We always like to start with some housekeeping things as well. So some rights that we kind of ask everybody to agree to that's here. We're in like a webinar style, so it's a different vibe kind of than if we were in person or something else. So for privacy, if somebody shares something, we want to just make sure that we keep that private and keep it respectful of other people who are joining. So if we like know somebody personally and they share something, we won't share that on later on. Yeah, it looks different with technology. Participation, I think we have a poll, maybe a couple polls and some questions. So participate as you can. So you can, type in the chat. You can answer that poll. You can also pass though, so you don't have to participate in anything that you don't want to. That's totally okay with us. Respect kind of ties into that privacy piece I mentioned. So just being respectful of everybody that's joining today. You can ask questions at any point. We'll do our best to answer them as we go through. But otherwise, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So if we miss anything, we'll try to get to it at the end as well. And then you can have fun today too. So you're totally allowed to do that. And I think the information is really cool. So just a little safety check here too. So you can pass at any time. You can step away if you need to. Yeah, pass on anything. We're going to talk about some stuff that might feel heavy for some folks. So just make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And if you need to step away, do that and take your time on coming back. This is being recorded as well. So if you miss anything and want to come back to it later, it should be available for you. So we're going to start by doing a poll. So I'm going to launch that and I'll read through each question. They'll all pop up at once. So there's 4 questions that I'll have. Answer them however you feel is right for you, and then we'll go through them after. So the first one says our body weight is fully determined by genetics. So do we think this is true, false, or maybe we're unsure? The next one says BMI or body mass index does not tell us if someone is healthy or unhealthy. So true, false, unsure. And then the next one says health is complex and includes more than just our bodies. True, false, or unsure. And then the last one says beauty standards change all the time. So true, false, or unsure. So if you wanted to take a minute to answer these questions, and then we can talk about them after we get some answers in. And if you can't see this poll, let me know. I've launched it, so it should be popping up for you. Q&A. See, I can't see. Oh, it's showing the results. Okay, let me see, because we were practicing earlier and maybe I mixed it up. Oh, relaunch poll. Okay, got it. Okay, you should be able to answer now. Okay, I see answers coming in, so we're good. Okay, I think everybody's answered now. So I'm going to end it and then we can all see kind of what the results are. Share. Okay, so for this first one, our body weight is fully determined by genetics. I see some trues, I see some falses, quite a bit of falses. So yeah, we would say this is false. So for some people, about 25% of their body weight's determined by genetics. For fat folks, that might be higher. So like 70 to 80% is determined by genetics. So there's a pretty big role that genetics plays on our weight. And I think this is a good thing to know because it takes a little bit of the pressure, of society off of us for that one. For BMI, I see lots of trues, some falses, some unsures. So for the BMI one, this is true. BMI doesn't tell us if someone's healthy. There's really interesting history around BMI. So I'll share a little bit of it, but I would suggest you go and look into it because it's really cool. So the body mass index that is often used by doctors to determine health was invented by a statistician. So it was made to measure populations and not just individuals. So it was used for statistical purposes. That was its main role. So it wasn't ever meant to be used for health. In the mid 20th century, insurance companies wanted a way to know how to charge policyholders. So they used the BMI for it. So insurance companies assumed that larger people would be less healthy, and so they could charge them more for insurance. So then that kind of led to doctors using them in doctors' offices, and now they're very widely used, but they don't actually determine someone's health or anything like that. So super cool. You should look into it a little bit more. There's lots more I could share. So health is complex and includes more than just our bodies. Everybody said this is true. So yes, very true. It involves lots of different things. So it's our physical health, emotional, mental, spiritual, sexual health, social health. So all aspects of our health are kind of intertwined. So somebody might have good mental health, but maybe their physical health is struggling, and they might have struggles with mental health, and so their physical health might struggle. So all these things are really interconnected. And what's good and healthy for one person might be different for another person too. So extra complexities there. And the last one, beauty standards change all the time. Lots of trues, one false, some unsures. So this is a history-based kind of question. So throughout history, beauty standards have been different all throughout time. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well as we go through some things today. But yeah, if we think about body shapes trending throughout the years, or fashion trends, things that we see on magazines throughout the years and in media and stuff like that too. So society tends to determine what's beautiful, and it changes quite often. Okay, thanks for participating. I think I stopped sharing that. So we're going to talk a little bit about body image because it's a good kind of intro to talking about body neutrality in a little bit. Yeah, body image is the thoughts and feelings that we have about our body. It's something that affects all of us, no matter who we are. We all kind of have a body image. Some of us might think about it more or less, or maybe not at all, but it's something that we have. How we feel about our bodies comes from lots of different places. So we learn about our bodies from like family, especially when we're younger and we're growing up and we're not really socializing quite yet. We learn lots from our family. When we get to school, we start to learn from friends, our education system, like our teachers and the people around us that way too. Also from media. Society tends to set the standards too. So we're learning lots from society as we grow older. School's a really big one though too. So we get education around healthy eating. I remember when I was in school, I learned about the Canada Food Guide, which I think changes quite a bit too. I think it just changed recently. And we also are hearing messages in like gym class about exercise. And this messaging can be different as we get older and have different teachers and things like that as well. So we're getting lots of messages throughout our whole lives. It kind of never stops, right? So it's not something that can be undone in just like one workshop or one discussion that we have with someone. It can take lots of time and effort. So if you're supporting students who are struggling, just remembering that like you telling them and supporting them and telling them good things, it might not be super helpful at that time, but like over time it can get easier. So that is good to know. And then making sure that if you're supporting someone too, to take care of yourself. Lots of us might be struggling with our own body image, and that can add some extra difficulty into supporting others. If we're learning and kind of reflecting on our own body image, and then exploring how we can support folks in the work that we do, we can find ways to cope and like find ways to move towards body acceptance and do good things that way. Body image involves like body positivity and body negativity as well. So that's what we'll talk about shortly as well. So body positivity sort of began as a political movement. So there was lobbying to reduce discrimination of fat people. Lots of really, really cool history around this too. So I'll touch on a little bit of it. So it kind of began in like the 1950s, 1960s era, and it was happening in some different places, like around the US, mostly in the Western area. There were Black women on the front lines of fat activism. Some like essays were written that were super cool and really important around that. So there was a bit of an intersectional lens there. In other places, it was a little bit more centered around white folks. So in some parts of the movement, there weren't Black voices being included. But in other areas, there was a man in 1969 named Bill. He was angry about the way that the world was treating his fat wife. And he had read an article a few years before from another man named Lou, who wrote an article about the way that fat people were treated. He shared this article with lots of people and formed a group, which at the time was called the National Association to Aid Fat Americans. And it's now called the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance. And it's the longest running fat rights organization. There was also in California around the same time some feminists who were angry about the treatment of fat people as well. They formed the Fat Underground, and they were calling it fat liberation. So rather than fat acceptance, in other areas it was fat liberation. And they did some really great work around it too. So this is kind of where it began with fat acceptance. Yeah, and it was like about fighting fat phobia. So fat phobia is something that has existed throughout society for a really long time, still exists today, especially if we think about social media too. There's lots of information going around very quickly. And we can see on social media that when fat people are sharing images and videos, they're like very often harassed and discriminated against. So lots of work to do still. And now we can kind of see that it's more of a body philosophy. So it started as a political movement. Now it's a body philosophy. So it's a way to live life and accept and love our bodies in a world where that can be really difficult. Especially with social media. We're always like everywhere we go hearing about how we should look and how we should feel about our bodies. And body positivity represents body diversity as well. So it's more than just being like fat or thin. There's other representations of different bodies. So skin color and like hair type, height, body proportions, body type, things like that. And yeah, if it's fighting body shaming as well. So if someone loves their body, then body shaming might affect them less. There's a little bit of stuff there too. just some examples of what body positivity sounds like. So the big one that we hear quite often is all bodies are good bodies. Some other things we might say to ourselves is I am beautiful, I love my body, I'm perfect as I am, and I like the person I see in the mirror. Some folks might look into the mirror and tell themselves these things too, and pick out like things that they love about their bodies. So those are examples of what it looks like. Just for time, I think this one will just be a silent reflection. So I have a few questions here that you can think about and reflect on, and I'll talk about them a little bit. So how might a body positive person feel about their body? How might they feel about food? And how might they feel about exercise? So someone who's body positive might feel really good about their body. They might be confident. They might wear clothes that they really want to wear, stuff like that. They might feel good about food too. So they might eat a variety of foods. They wouldn't feel bad for eating certain foods. So they'd have a good relationship with food. And same with exercise too. They would exercise, doing things that they like. So moving their body in a way that feels good for them. They wouldn't feel bad about not exercising. Yeah, so just some examples there. And then on the other hand, for body negativity, so just reflecting on these questions again, how might a body negative person feel about their body? How might they feel about food? And how might they feel about exercise? So a body negative person might feel bad about their bodies. They might wear clothes to cover themselves up rather than clothes that they want to wear. Yeah, they might say negative things about themselves. It might affect them in other areas of their lives too. They might have not a great relationship with food. They might feel bad for eating foods that they've been told are like junk foods or unhealthy foods. They might restrict their eating, things like that. And then exercise, they might over-exercise or exercise too much or do things that they don't enjoy doing to move their body. Or they might feel bad if they're not exercising at all. So we can kind of see how these two things might affect someone. And then body negativity might sound like, I hate my body, I feel like a potato, I should exercise more, I ate bad foods, and no one will ever love my body. So body image exists on a spectrum. So we talked about body positivity and body negativity. And then there's this secret third thing in the middle that we'll talk about shortly with body neutrality. So no one is ever going to feel like body positive all the time, because that would take a lot of energy, and there's things that affect us day to day that might affect our body image. And there might be days where we don't like our bodies and we're more body negative. So we kind of move throughout this, throughout our life, day to day, even minute to minute. So maybe we were on TikTok and we saw a fitness influencer that made us not feel great about our body. Or maybe we went to school and a friend made a comment on our body that made us feel really good. So maybe we love our body a little bit more. Yeah. And some body positivity critiques too. Kind of the reason we're going to talk about body neutrality in a second. So it's sort of lost its intersectional lens. It's become an all bodies matter type movement. So we're not considering the experiences that other people might have who are struggling with other things. So while a disabled person and a fat person experience discrimination that's similar, they aren't the same. Nuance is often lost on issues such as these when we're thinking about race and socioeconomic status and other things. It becomes more and more layered and more complex. So we're sort of missing some key discussions that are happening with body positivity. Beauty and bodies continue to be centered. We can see this in lots of body positive ads and body types that society deem acceptable and beautiful for bigger bodies too. And yeah, feminist thought often speaks to the male gaze. So at worst, body positivity doesn't reject or work against the gaze. It just kind of diversifies what is kind of seen as beautiful, right? And it has people thinking about their bodies on a regular basis. And hopefully this is resulting in feeling better about our bodies, but that is a lot of energy to put into thinking about it all the time. It doesn't allow for variation in feelings around our bodies. So we would feel pressure to feel positive all the time about our bodies. So if we're like having an off day, but we're like a body positive person, then that can kind of feel extra bad and be an extra stress on us. And there's just extra pressure on us to feel good about our bodies all the time and love them all the time. And if we don't, that can't be great. It can turn into toxic positivity as well. So toxic positivity involves dismissing negative emotions and responding to distress with false reassurances rather than with empathy. So an example of this might be if a student came up to a teacher and said, I really hate my body and I wish I was thin. And maybe the teacher responded with like, you're still beautiful, or you shouldn't feel bad and you should just love your body. It kind of really reduces that, right? Sometimes if we have a student come up to us and they're really struggling, it can be hard to know how to respond. So the best thing you can do is just validate those feelings and respond with empathy. Yeah, but yeah, body positivity can turn into toxic positivity. And then it's an unattainable goal for many as well. So this pressure to be positive all the time is unattainable. Like I said, takes a lot of energy. Lots of the images we see in media and on social media are photoshopped as well. So that's really unattainable to get the bodies that we're often seeing. And being happy and positive about body images 100% of the time, yeah, is unattainable. Same kind of idea there. This allows the wellness industry to make money off of this movement as well. So they can kind of take advantage of this too. At SERC, we talk a lot about attraction. So it can work in different ways. So attraction works in different ways. Some people don't experience sexual attraction, and some folks don't experience attraction based on looks or gender. It might occur when they get to know someone. So for those of us that have experienced sexual attraction, we aren't attracted to everyone, right? Or everyone of a certain gender. So body positivity says that all bodies are beautiful. But then if all bodies are beautiful, why aren't we attracted to everyone? So despite our lack of attraction to the entire world, we can still value people despite their looks. So that's kind of the main takeaway here. But we won't totally throw away body positivity. So we'll talk a little bit more about that next. And I'm going to pass over to Jay. Do you want me to stop sharing and then you'll share?
Yeah, we'll switch. Yeah,
Okay.
so we can like click our own slides. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So kind of continuing along on this journey that Chris started us on, they kind of had us thinking about body image. They kind of showed body positivity in contrast to body negativity. And so we can kind of say with body neutrality, it's either like an evolution or a reaction to a lot of the things Chris just set up for us. So I'm going to kind of show you a similar slide that you just saw and talk about it a little bit more. So body neutrality, kind of how we talked about body positivity and body negativity, kind of functions in a few ways. So, oops, sorry, I got to move some of my slides around. Yeah, so speaking about body neutrality, kind of how it evolved from body positivity is it, unlike those critiques we just saw, it doesn't try to tie value to beauty or bodies or body parts. It kind of just says like we all have value just because we exist. It's like everyone wins a prize. We all have value no matter what. But that kind of one size fits all doesn't work for folks. So that kind of like Chris was talking about, depending on our different identities or intersecting identities, that journey, or like Chris mentioned, supporting someone, it's a process. It's not like you can say one thing and everything's fixed. Everyone's journey is going to be a little different based on various identities and how their body functions and things in the world. And so body neutrality kind of allows for more ways of perhaps working through it. It also, my viewpoint, kind of uses empathy to validate feelings. So again, going back to Chris's example of someone just being like, but you're so great, you're so cute, don't worry about it. Like, just push away those feelings. Body neutrality would be like, yeah, okay, let's talk about this feeling. Where's that coming from? Like, let's really sit with these people or sit with these feelings that people are having and explore that rather than trying to fix it necessarily. And two, this doesn't have to like promote or glorify body negativity or body hate, like it says on this slide. Like if someone's like, oh, I just hate the way my body is, it's not like, yep, you should, but it explores that feeling. It validates that, you know, people feel like that, and that happens from time to time. Also, speaking about that journey of supporting someone, it's not a one-time thing. On this slide that Chris made, you know, you've seen that spectrum, like body positivity, body negativity, body neutrality, kind of in the middle. Body neutrality can act as a bridge. Like Chris said, we're not going to throw body positivity away completely because it works for many reasons, which we'll talk about more. But for folks to get there, body neutrality can act as like a step or a bridge to get there. And finally, that has the ability to include more people. Being totally positive about your body 100% of the time, like Chris said, that could turn into toxic positivity. It could be like fake it before you make it kind of mentalities or whatnot. Body neutrality, by acknowledging and validating those feelings, acting as a bridge, recognizing we're going to move around, we're going to take a step forward, two back, and whatnot. It's able to include more people on that journey rather than only the folks that have made it over to one end of it. Furthermore, I think this will also come up, and Chris mentioned it a tiny bit. A lot of body neutrality comes from like disability and queer theories. So, for example, body positivity may not work for a trans person that is seeking medical transition, whether they want hormones or surgeries to have like gender affirming like healthcare to change their bodies. It would not work to tell that person, oh, well, you know, your body's great. It's just accept it. It's like, no, we have these medical technologies that are available in healthcare that, you know, why not use these options? Similarly, a disabled person, maybe with chronic pain, it's also, it hits different to say, well, your body gives you so much when that person's potentially experiencing pain right in the moment. It doesn't mean, you know, that their bodies are bad and we should run back to body negativity. But again, we got to validate those feelings, validate those experiences, and not use a one-size-fits-all approach to help someone, support someone on their journey. So body neutrality, how it can kind of sound, just like we did sound with the positivity. Instead of saying like all bodies are good bodies, we can say things like there's no wrong way to have a body. That acknowledges we all have bodies. It doesn't make us wrong, but our relationships with our bodies, we can acknowledge that there's positive and negative pieces to it. I accept my body as it is, right? Because some things we can't change about our bodies, that's great. I paid someone to put a ring through my nose. I have tattoos, we get haircuts, many different things, right? But there's also things about our bodies that we can't control. And so there's also like an acceptance piece that can come with it. My body helps me in many ways. Again, for someone experiencing chronic pain, or maybe their body can't do certain things, that statement might work differently. But, you know, hey, like if you enjoy hiking, your body takes you hiking. Or going back to food, if you enjoy certain types of food, your body helps you taste that food, right? We can come up with many different examples. Body works hard, deserves kindness. Yeah, like again, kind of all those examples, we do many things with our bodies every day. So it goes right along with it. If it helps me, like I don't need to beat up my body. I need to work with my body, even if it's kind of like what I just thought of, like in school when you get group assignments, you're like, oh no, I'm working with, maybe that's your relationship with your body. However, you're on a team. You got to do something with it. You got to find a way to make it work. All bodies are different, and that's fine. Again, accepting the no one size fits all. How can I honor my body today? Like, hey, if I'm working hard with my body, it deserves kindness. What's a way I can show my body kindness and therefore show myself some kindness? Similarly to body positivity, there's also critiques of body neutrality, even though it's newer. And after these critiques, we're going to transition to like the final what you can do about it piece, or how you can use some of these pieces. Body neutrality, the way I just described it, still remains kind of that individualistic piece. So that history that Chris gave about like movement versus like body philosophy, from like organizations lobbying politicians to a Dove campaign saying like hourglass figures are great if they're big or small, but make sure you have an hour, right? Kind of how some corporations have made money off of it. Body neutrality still has that individualistic piece. So I forget the example, it already fell out of my head, someone said earlier, but an example I'm thinking of is, you know, like a XXX size clothing might cost more than the smaller medium. An airline seat, people might be forced to pay for 2 seats if their body doesn't fit in like this small compartment that everyone's supposed to fit in. A body neutrality, body neutral viewpoint might help your like mental health in those moments, but it doesn't change the fact that those things exist. It doesn't change those systematic pieces. So it kind of lacks that political movement that body positivity once had, or kind of still does. Yeah, and so it doesn't speak to that need for change. It's just like, I can stay here, or I can use this as a bridge to get to body positivity. It addresses that body image piece, but all of those outside messages, body neutrality doesn't necessarily address that. So that's why, okay, looking at time, we're doing good. That's why, so kind of talking to service providers, most of you, I think when you signed up are educators. If you're not an educator, that's okay. But speaking to your professional hat, you all work within systems, institution, organizations. And so some of the skills we can use or think about using body positivity and or neutrality, you can cause or help create or move some change organizationally, systematically, institutionally. And sometimes it's like those small pieces that we can do. So what does it look like for a professional? Because some of those what it sounds like slides we shared aren't necessarily statements you would use, depending on your position. And so some things body positivity and neutrality have in common. Like we said, let's not throw away body positivity. It's not like body neutrality's in, body positivity's out. It's like, let's look at how these things operate and use the best of both. Both of them really have media analysis. So talking about those outside messages coming in, social media has come up quite a bit. Criticizing corporations selling us body positivity, you know, influencers, commercials, TV shows, movies, whatnot. Both of them kind of would ask like, well, is this body negative? Is this body positive? How's this making me feel, or supposed to make me feel about my body or bodies in general? And so like Chris mentioned before, I think she said, you know, literacy skills, I think that came up. And so this would be a piece of this, right? Understanding those messages and being able to name them. Having an idea of not going for a perfect. So like kind of the critique of body positivity not being possible. Being perfect isn't possible, right? Like that's a problem. There's no such thing as perfect in most situations. And so they would both do this a little bit differently, where body positivity would kind of say, you know, being flawed is being perfect. Being perfectly unperfect, maybe they would say, where body neutrality would be like, yeah, just kind of forget it. But both of them would kind of critique this idea of like perfect or better, or like hierarchies based on bodies. And that what I mean by train the internal monologue is what does body positivity and neutrality sound like? Some people might use those as mantras in the morning. Chris mentioned, you know, you might say these things in the mirror. And so both kind of have a way to, yeah, kind of have their own little mantras to counteract, again, those things coming outside. So if we can have like literacy skills to understand where messages are coming from. If folks are familiar with like the 5 media literacy questions that analyze like who made this, how is it made to entice me, like who's missing from it, what's it trying to sell, how is it making me feel, and how might others feel. I'm summarizing a little bit those questions. And then we kind of analyze like, okay, this is making me feel this way. Is it saying there is a perfect, or there's something that's a better that I should attain to? Okay, how can I react to this within myself? And so there's some skills we can give people. It's not just us saying like, oh yeah, you're beautiful, or, you know, all bodies, there's no wrong way to have bodies. Like us as service providers having those mantras is okay, but how can we also teach some of these literacy skills and analyze some of these pieces with folks? I did bring this up a little bit, so I will revisit it, but body neutrality kind of coming from queer and disability theories. We're saying like, your body's great, don't worry about it. That message can be taken differently by different folks for various reasons. I kind of brought up like trans experience or maybe different experiences around ability. But queer and disability theories also ask us to decenter norms and expectations. So again, when we think about these mantras, we think about these messages, we do that media analysis. I think we do need to think about, you know, things like, for me, I have worked in like bicycle advocacy and teaching people how to fix bikes and ride bikes. And I very much believe in that. And that's something that can help with community health, neighborhoods. I won't tell you all about that right now. However, one critique of it that I think is fairly fair is not everyone can physically ride a bike. And so some bicycle advocates, hashtag not all, will be like, you know, kind of go too far to one way and be like, cars are bad. But, you know, if for some people that don't have usage of their legs, certainly there's bikes you can pedal with your hands, but some people need a motor vehicle to have access to their communities, right? So we have to think about different bodies that are able in different ways, and not just figure out our own norms or what the maybe mainstream or dominant norm is. That being client focused led, as a service provider, I think body neutrality, if we're going to support someone on their journey, right? Again, Chris said it's not a one-time thing. We need to ask folks where they're coming from, where they heard these things, what they mean by certain words, and kind of have that empathy in those feelings that they have, and explore that, like their own attitudes and motivations within themselves. Identify structures, not just individuals. So it's not just like, you're beautiful, stop thinking that, when every message in the world is telling them they're not beautiful, right? Let's name and identify those systems. And the final, like, yeah, be trauma informed, related to all the pieces above. Just, we don't know what people have been through, and it perhaps could be attached to trauma. And we can't just tell them like, you're beautiful, everything's fine, right? That's not necessarily trauma informed. It's not following someone on their journey. It's not actually providing support. So to kind of wrap up, I want to give some examples of how SERC talks about some of these things, or some examples. So maybe you heard a few things the way Chris and I have been talking, that would be helpful. But I have 5 examples, and I'll try to do them quickly so we still have time for questions and things here at the end. But for example, puberty on the top, Chris mentioned that they like presenting about puberty with young folks in their work. But often when we talk about body changes, we'll say things like some bodies, they may or can, because puberty is also a journey, and there's some ties to body image in there. And most bodies change in certain ways. We can talk about like body hair change. We can talk about height and weight changes. We can talk about acne, body odors. We can talk about change in like sexual and reproductive functioning, like in genitals. But we can't tell someone this is how your body's going to, this is the end point. This is the end point of your journey. So like body neutrality isn't like body positivity is the end point. We would practice language within puberty to allow different feelings and different paths along that journey that we can't predict. Similarly, around the feelings thing, and kind of related to puberty, if we talk about menstruation, people's experience with that can be so wide and varying. There's a lot of different language. Certainly, some people will call it a period, menstruation. Some people will call it moon time. Some people, it's very much not wanted. For some people, it's an inconvenience. It's painful. For some people, it's like power giving. Now they have the ability to produce or give birth, perhaps. And so there's like spiritual and physical power within that. We're not going to determine which experience folks are having. We're going to provide factual information and acknowledge those different pieces. We might have factual information where we can clear up. So like I mentioned before, not reinforcing body negativity. If someone says, oh, it's really painful and horrible, we might provide information saying, well, if it's painful, there could be health issues and you could see a healthcare provider, right? But yeah, there can be cramps. Some people have like less pain. Some people have more, definitely see a healthcare provider. So we wouldn't say just like, yeah, it's painful, deal with it. We would acknowledge those varying feelings and provide facts on what folks can do about it. Again, not one size fits all. Pregnancy, I think this is how we would talk about it, but also like in our own lives, if we find out someone in our life is pregnant, decenter our norms. For some of us, we'd be like, oh, that's wonderful. For some of us, would be like, I never want to be pregnant or have children, maybe. We can't assume that. We can ask folks like, oh, how does that make you feel? Is that good, bad? Or I've, in my life, a little bit different, but folks have told me like they broke up with someone. I'm like, and how do you feel? I don't want to assume they're sad. It could be a good thing. Similarly, with pregnancy, we can't always assume that's intended or wanted or has the feelings we're assuming about it. Two more. Body movement comes up often when we're talking about body image in these pieces. And so Chris already talked about this one a little bit, but exercise, we might just say body movement. So that could be stretching, walking, rolling, running, swimming, having sex. There's so many different ways that folks can move their body. We are not going to determine, oh, well, that one doesn't burn X number of calories, right? We don't talk about it in that way. And so it's more, yeah, you're moving in your body in a way that feels good, that works for you. And finally, a lot of what this comes down to is pleasure. We try to keep that in a lot of our conversations. And so I think in context to thinking about body neutrality and body positivity, body neutrality would say, let's not assume what someone's pleasure is. Someone, yeah, I don't care what my body looks like, right? I have other things. Other people might be, I want to change my body because it would be gender affirming, or the world will become more accessible to me, whatever it is. We got to, again, decenter that norm and try to find out what pleasure means for other folks. And one example from our work related to this is sometimes we get the question, what does sex feel like? That's a question we can't answer because also sex is different for so many people. But we try to use language that will acknowledge many different paths. We tell folks like, whether you're doing it with yourself, for someone else, or multiple people, really it should feel good. It should be like mutually agreed upon with consent between the parties involved. And so what feels good to you and other folks is gonna change. And that's part of consent, talking about that with partners to find out. Where some folks actually want to feel pain, that's a little bit a different conversation, but like, again, that would be consent, figuring that out and talking about that with someone. And so thinking about pleasure, kind of the thing I want to leave us with is with body image, like ideas and language around like fake it till you make it, no pain, no gain, like all bodies are beautiful, beauty is important kind of messages. I want us to like really question like what's the worth in it. So taking kind of a feminist lens, often women, which are kind of women and femme folks, are usually kind of centered within body positivity in these kind of discussions. Speaking about that male gaze that Chris brought up kind of from feminist discourse, often it's about like sacrifice, do this for this like attainable, supposedly attainable beauty standard that really isn't. Who does that end up being worth for? Is it pleasurable? This kind of unobtainable thing we have, is there pleasure at the end of it, or do we just have this thing that we were sold? So kind of the idea of who's gaining, and does this process, this journey, build pleasure? And I think it's a little bit different when we look at body negativity. That takes that empathy approach, that takes that support and journeying with folks. I think if we think about it in terms of pleasure, that might help us frame it a little bit differently. Oof, that was a lot of information, everybody. So with that, I think we have a little bit of time for questions. While we're doing that, I don't see questions in the question box, but I'm going to put an evaluation we have from SERC into the chat box for everyone that I would love if you could fill out. It only takes about a minute, but other than that, yeah, we have time for questions.
Well, we just want to say, while people are maybe thinking things over, I think it goes without saying that we're just scratching the surface here. There's so much that you both covered. Thank you, Chris and Jay, for every gem that you shared with us today. If I could speak on the Nüton team, speak for us, I know I think journey is probably the word of the day, perhaps. We have been on our own journey as a team. And we've really been questioning some of the language that we use, especially with the philosophy that we approach with our programs. So, for example, in the past, we've used the term "all bodies are good bodies," and just hearing the discussion that you brought forward today. And I loved what you said about decentralizing norms and being really client and person-centered. We've really thought about those words that we've used in the past, and moving forward in a more inclusive and trauma-informed way. So thank you very much for bringing all of that to light, and hopefully it brings some food for thought to other folks in the virtual space as well. And Tressa, if you have anything to add, please feel free.
Yeah, I don't see any questions coming in yet, so please ask if you do have any questions. But that just makes me think, when we initially reached out to SERC, it was about that language, and that's how this, I guess, relationship is formed. And now we're here doing a webinar together, and I think that that's a really beautiful thing, and such a representation of just community too, right? And being able to connect, and this it just go from an email to this too, and now having a great working relationship too with another organization that, yeah, just a wonderful resource to have in our community. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I think there's just so much to unpack that it's almost hard to think of questions, it seems like. And that's quite all right. Oh, there we go. We do have one question or a comment here from somebody who says, this is the biggest impact on development and mind over body. The negative surroundings and personal views are the hardest stumbling points to support children and adults.
Yeah, if I can add something to this comment. Well, first, also, like, thanks to Nüton, like recognizing the partnership. We were just like, information, it's only an hour. So Chris and I were going pretty quick. But yeah, I think, I don't know if this person's necessarily going this route, but, you know, kind of like in the beginning, that safety check, that was a picture of my kitten, like snuggling a kitten is my safety check. As service providers, like, we have our own experience with this too. So like the body neutrality piece, we can't just be like this completely neutral person and like support everyone, right? We have to take care of ourselves too. And also that like naming the systems piece that we brought up, you know, recognizing that for yourself, like, what is your experience with this? Those mantras you have in your head, where did those come from, right? So there's also that personal work before going and doing it with others.
We have, that's a great, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Chris. We do have another question here. I firmly believe in the client-centered approach, and I also wonder how do we then do kind of that generic population health messaging? It can be so tricky. Any thoughts around that? I know it's a big question.
That is a big question, and that's a really good question. And I don't know if I have an answer to it. Yeah, because everybody's so diverse, and there's just so many people that we want to be able to support, but each individual is different, and we have different ways of supporting them. So yeah, the generic population health messaging, I don't know, maybe like body neutrality is a good starting place for that. Just be neutral about everything. Jay, did you have anything on that one?
Yeah, the only thing I can add to is like, I don't know if this is maybe an overstatement, but I don't know if generic population health messaging exists then, right? And I think what I've seen in a lot of kind of public health pieces is sometimes the messages like target different communities differently based off consultations with those communities. So that client-centered piece, for example, like at SERC, we have a new program on like sexual health and like healthcare access for queer men, cis and trans queer men. And so there's been groups, focus groups, discussing with folks on their feelings around that, what messaging they want to see. And, you know, I've seen that in other examples as well. Like, we can just look back at COVID or look currently at COVID, not even back, on how that impacts different communities and the different conversations happening in different communities. So I think it's to like a combination of that, you know, neutrality language, but also finding out from folks, like, how can we decenter our norms and find out what some community norms are and work from there.
It's a great point. And yeah, it's definitely tricky. You know, maybe a starting place too is just doing an audit of the language, just kind of how I'm just speaking from experience for our own team, just kind of auditing the language that you currently use. And, you know, is it heteronormative, or, you know, does it maybe speak to one population versus more generally? So yeah, definitely a tricky balance, but yeah, all good things to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, just looking at the time here, thank you all for asking those great questions and your wonderful feedback. And again, thank you, Jay and Chris, and the team at SERC. We so value everything you shared with us today, and we're excited about hopefully continuing this partnership in the future. Wonderful.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. And thank you everybody for attending today. So just a friendly reminder that we will be getting the recording up on our website shortly. And we will be picking out a prize winner as well. So stay tuned for that. And also we have a very, very quick survey at the end. So that should be coming your way as soon as you exit out of the webinar. So please fill that out. We appreciate it.